Hello everyone.
Hello again at last.
Finally.
Finally, indeed. So, I believe this is this episode 10?
Could well be, yeah. Episode 10.
Anniversary.
episode.
Happy anniversary.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, finally got 10 episodes. No, it's I'm enjoying these episodes. We haven't been able to do one for a while, but I'm glad we're back into it now, you know.
Well, we're trying anyway.
Yeah, trying.
Very trying. Yes, so, right, to business.
Yeah.
Yes, because there has been a fair amount happening in the news. There has been another shooting in America, because of course there has.
Yeah.
Someone was shot in the back several times whilst trying to in a car.
I've got to be honest. I haven't been watching the news much today. I don't know anymore. I don't know any more about the board, apart from what I heard on the radio this morning. But from what I understand, there was a gentleman that's been shot in the back, and now he's completely paralysed, basically from the waist down. And this has sparked, intense race riots in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Which is not a million miles actually away from Minnesota, where a lot of the big riots happened after George Floyd's murder.
Yes.
So they're in kind of like similar areas of America, really. Wisconsin, Minnesota.
They border Canada. Those two states. Yes, and I heard tell that this occurred in front of his children as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't read into it, but I wouldn't mind betting that was true.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Because nothing surprises me out of America anymore.
No.
Not since 2016.
Yeah.
The
The conventions in America might surprise you. Have you been watching them at all?
I haven't. No.
They've mercifully passed me by a lot, but some people who have watched them, of course, they're all on Zoom, aren't they?
Yes.
The most.
We never knew what Zoom was until this year. No one had heard of Zoom.
Yeah. most bizarre things that are happening in the conventions, and the Democrats are speaking in just meaningless platitudes, about light and darkness and
yes,
all of that shit, and the Republicans are just
It's interesting that's coming from the Democrat side, because meaningless platitudes was what was coming from the right in this country.
Yeah. No, it's true, but the Republicans are even more like barking mad. So they're accusing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who are like two of the most centrist, moderate, middle of the road politicians in the whole of America, and they're accusing Joe Biden of behaving like Fidel Castro and things. It's just a Republican politician actually said that.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. Anyway.
So, little segue here. Did you know that Guantanamo Bay, the infamous American military base and prison?
Yeah.
America actually leases it from Cuba.
Yeah.
I think it's something like $500 or something, a pitiful amount, because they've had it since God knows when. Well, since the Spanish-American War, and it was what is now a pitiful amount, and apparently America has been sending these checks every year, and obviously before he stepped down, and I imagine his brother Raul continued anyway. Fidel used to just simply they were just accumulating in his desk drawer. He never cashed them. He didn't give a fuck. He's just like, shut up.
Yeah.
It was interesting as well. Was it Kennedy who imposed the embargo?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, JFK. He made sure to put a massive order of Cuban cigars in.
Yeah.
Before the embargo was. Unfortunately, I don't believe he probably wouldn't have lived long enough to smoke them. Bless him.
Yeah.
But presumably they were.
Well, presumably they would be smoked. I mean, who knows?
Well, I mean, they might have. They might have quite easily been found by Bill Clinton later on, and then used on Monica Lewinsky. Which and I saw a thing on Monica Lewinsky recently, It was all about public
You know,
shaming. It was on the John Oliver show. She's incredible. She has an amazing sense of humour about it.
Do you know she's studied the London School of Economics?
I did not know that.
After the whole thing with Bill Clinton, she went and studied a master's degree at the LSE.
Oh, well,
it's just like good for her.
Well done her, and I'll tell you what as well.
But at least she's got
this is going to be so fucking. This is going to be quite awful to say, but she is gorgeous now. Mm-hmm. She is absolutely stunning. She really is. Anyway, total fucking segue.
Well, at least she's got a sense of humour about it.
She absolutely has. So yes, we should really get back to the more pressing and doer matter of this. This poor gentleman.
Yeah.
He's African American, isn't he?
I believe
fellow
so.
in America. Yes, this has been shot. Yeah, it's the American police don't do themselves any favours, do they?
No. It's funny because on the drive to Fred to where we're going to record this podcast, me and Fred and I, one of the things we want to discuss today is identity politics. And,
yes.
Because there's a good side to identity politics, but me and Fred both share the view that, particularly when it comes to Britain at least, identity politics for left-wing politics in this country, identity politics has been something of a bit of a liability in some departments.
Well, it tends to be throughout the world, not just Britain. America has a version of it. Australia has a version of it. It just seems to exist everywhere, and it's especially it's especially prevalent in Canada, where they now have a law that mandates that one must use the correct pronoun, and to deliberately misgender someone can result in a fine, which is what happened to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, well, I think in the context of what's happening in America, it's worth saying, and I think this is very, very important to emphasise, is what I would describe as identity politics, and I don't know if Fred agrees with this, but what I would describe as identity politics, when you look at like the black civil rights activist America, it's easy to kind of misconstrue what we describe as identity politics as black Americans demanding, their rights, and that's not really what I mean by it. What I mean it to be is a certain kind of identitarian left wing thought, which says you're a left wing or a socialist on sex, gender, some extent race and religion, all of those things. Whereas that's not to say there's a different kind of politics, it's about the black Americans as a kind of an oppressed class. That's the kind of good identity politics.
That is the good identity politics, and there are many arguments that can be made for it, such as restriction of voter registration, where they make you jump through needless hoops in order to register to vote. For example, and also to actually vote as well. Voter ID laws are a big thing, big controversial thing in America, where you have to kind of, some states are insisting that you present formal identification papers, documentation, when you actually come to physically vote. The problem with that is that there is actually no federal mandated law about such things, neither just in general federal law precedent, or indeed in the Constitution. And nowhere else needs this. But certainly Trump was a big exponent of this, saying that voter fraud was a huge thing, despite the fact that voter fraud would require an incredible amount of effort and an incredible amount of risk for one extra vote. It just doesn't make sense. Does not make sense at all. So he's creating a problem that doesn't exist. A bit like how Listerine came to be. Did you know that?
No.
Well, Listerine, it was actually originally a floor cleaner.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It is a floor cleaner, is Listerine, and they invented the fake illness halitosis.
Yeah.
There's this awful thing called halitosis that gives you bad breath, and this is the cure.
Yeah.
That's pretty much exactly what Donald Trump was going on about when it comes to this non-existent voter fraud. But the Republicans have obviously picked up on it, and the idea of presenting formal documentation when you come to vote directly impacts poorer communities, such as the African American community and the Hispanic community, who are much less likely, on average, to possess these types of formal identification. So it's deliberate voter suppression, which is fucking disgusting, quite frankly. So there's absolutely a case to be made for, it's certainly in America, for the idea that black people, I don't want to use that awful term, people of colour, because that to me just means you're still calling them coloured, and they don't like that. You know, people from different ethnic backgrounds, they are more, more likely to be tripped up by these laws. So that's a great case for that. In England, that's not a thing, or in Britain, that's not a thing, thankfully, and I hope it never is, because it would be ridiculous. The big thing now that Trump's got is postal votes. He thinks they're going to be all fraudulent. And he's blaming the US Postal Service. And basically, it's anything he can do to eliminate his opposition. And
it's very interesting, isn't it?
He's leveraging COVID.
You wonder actually how much of this is damage limitation on his part, because
there's a lot of damage to limit.
Well, if we're to believe the polls, and I say this very, very reluctantly, at the moment it looks like Biden is going to win. Now, the reason I say that, which means obviously from Trump's point of view, if he is losing this election, and it's hard to tell, he will presumably have to come up with an excuse. So he would say things like, "Oh well, postal votes, blah blah blah. The system is rigged against me." Now,
it's exactly the same as he said in 2016.
Yeah. Now, I would say the reason I say reluctantly is because it's worth remembering that if you look at the polls now, with where they were at the same point in the 2016 election, at this point in the election cycle, they're not massively dissimilar to the polls in late August 2016, when it was Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. I mean, Hillary Clinton had a supposed lead in the polls at this time of the year in 2016, and if you want to talk
beat her, and if you want to talk about a rigged system, Hillary Clinton is the best example, because so many states actually voted for Bernie Sanders.
Exactly.
But the delegates declared for Hillary. Which just goes to prove that realistically there is no point of having a popular vote in America.
And also, exactly right. There is no point in having a popular vote
because Hillary won by was it 3 million votes or something in the popular vote, but the electoral colleges came out for Trump. Well, so what's the point in having direct representation when these other people can just overrule you on a whim, and you can guarantee that these electoral college delegates, they're not average Joes like thee and me. They're elites. They are.
And also, the DNC managers, who are uniformly pro-Hillary and pro the Clinton brand in general, they did quite radically stack the deck against Bernie Sanders. I mean, if you look at the order of which states had their caucuses and their primaries, and which elections were going to be caucuses, they were deliberately done to give Bernie Sanders the hardest run possible at the Democratic nomination. So there's a fair amount of shenanigans and running on Hillary Clinton's part. But it is when we talk about the polls, because at the moment I notice a lot of liberal commentators in this country and in America are getting excited that Biden may actually beat Donald Trump. It's worth remembering that Hillary Clinton also had a lead in the polls at this time in 2016, and not only was she beaten, she was fairly comprehensively beaten. I mean,
in the Electoral College.
She lost at least 4 states which hadn't gone Republican for ages. I mean, Wisconsin, which we were just talking about, hadn't gone Republican since, I think, 1976, I think, or something very, very many years ago. And I also heard is that, so in 2016 Hillary Clinton's running mate was someone called Tim Kaine, who's a total cock. I mean, a ridiculous politician. Who's one of the most corporate sellout, Wall Street completely crawling up his own arse politicians in the whole of America. Tim Kaine's a senator from Virginia, right? I've heard it said now in 2016 the Democrats won Virginia on a very, very narrow margin. It was very, very close. I've heard that if Hillary Clinton had not selected Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, as her vice presidential candidate that year, the Democrats would have lost Virginia too. And so you're looking at almost a landslide. So it's worth remembering that the polls did show a lead for the Democrats last time, and they still lost to Donald Trump by quite a significant margin. And it is a long way to go between now and November. So there's still time for Biden and Kamala Harris to fuck it up. And there's one thing we know about centrist plonkers like the Democrats and the Labour Party is that they will always fuck up a good crisis. You give them any good crisis and they will find a way to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer has been gifted an enormous opportunity to create an entire generation of Labour voters in the kids who have had their futures ruined by the A-level algorithm before the U-turn. I reckon he fucks that up as well. Yeah. Anyway, sorry to go there, but anyway.
He already kind of has, because he's siding with the government, saying that children is an absolute vital number one priority, that children are back in school, where and as I said previously, I can't remember which episode, but it doesn't matter. It's got fuck all to do with education. It is getting the kids off the parents' hands so they can get the parents back to work. That's what it is. It's got fuck all to do with children's education. Because if it truly was about that, then they would have instituted some kind of grant system for private tutors, etc. But that's just not been the case. But it's to get them back en masse, so the parents can are pretty much forced to go back to work. And I stand by that. I really do.
It's funny. We were talking about this. We'll come back to identity politics in a bit, because
we will.
I'm all in favour of class politics with a racial dimension or a gender dimension, but I think what we mean by identity politics, we mean something quite different, something that's a very corrosive effect on politics. But one of the things we want to talk about is the current mess of the Tory party, because I've got a good friend of mine, and Fred has just mentioned the recent debacle over the A-levels results, but I've got a good friend of mine,
Is he the other one?
Yes, the other one.
Right, okay.
He's got a £5 bet with me that Johnson won't be around within 12 months' time, and he started this bet with me 6 months ago.
Now that's interesting, because I did see an article just yesterday that suggests, rumours abound that Boris is due to resign soon. Now it cites health problems that are a layover from his bout with COVID-19. But you on the way here, you said about the possibility. There's the rumour mill says that he's potentially a bit of an alky.
So for those of you that are unaware, there's a rumour going around social media at the moment that Boris Johnson has a drink problem. He's an alcoholic, basically.
And just want to get this quite clear. We are not going to make fun of that, because that is a very serious problem.
We're not
And if and I've been there myself quite recently, and I, if you're having a problem, for fuck's sake, please get help.
Yeah, we're not making fun of anyone's.
No, but we will address. We are just simply addressing the rumours at face value.
Well, there is some basis for the rumours. I mean, it's got to be said, Westminster has a drinking culture.
Yes. There are subsidised bar, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know how many bars there are in the Palace of Westminster?
4.
It's about 17.
What?
There are 17 bars in Westminster.
Fuck me, I thought 4 was a bit excessive.
There are 17, and the number of MPs who couldn't be described as functioning alcoholics is vanishingly small. And you've got all the combinations for an alcoholic culture. You've got high pressure job, a high amount of public visibility, anti-social hours, anti-family friendly hours, long hours. You've got some of those votes in Parliament take place very late at night. They take about 3-4 o'clock in the morning sometimes. Yeah. It's unusual for MPs to actually sleep in their offices and go to work the next day.
Okay, sorry about the interruption there, guys.
So I was talking about the alcoholic culture in Westminster. So you get the impression it's an environment which is ripe for alcohol abuse, and there's got to be MPs with drug problems as well.
There will be, especially cocaine.
Yeah, I mean,
because they can afford it.
I mean, you take the percentage of the population as a whole, which has a problem with drugs, whatever. Yeah, and you look at it would be remarkable. How many MPs are in the House of Commons? 650 or something. It would be remarkable if. It would be more astonishing if there was a group of 650 people anywhere in the UK without one example of someone in that group cohort without a drink or drug problem.
Absolutely.
So
I can understand. I can understand how that would get to people, and they would seek solace and or relief in mind-altering substances. I get it. I do it myself. So
anyway, I have absolutely nothing to back up this rumour whether Johnson is an alcoholic or not, apart from what I hear on social media. So this could have been Chinese whispers, but anyway, there's a
someone will call you racist for that.
But anyway, that's what I'm hearing anyway. So whether he resigns in about February next year, citing his alcoholism or whatever, is another thing. I've also heard new rumours about a 28-year-old female violinist, and a spousal walkout, which have not been confirmed or denied, and they're doing the rounds on social media at the moment.
No, that's news to me, I'm afraid. But then again, in this day and age, every time I look on Facebook, I just take, I get about 4 or 5 scrolls in and just go ugh, and put it down again.
But again, if Boris Johnson is removed by the Tory backbenchers, it does say something about how colossally fucked up the Tory party is. That this is, you look at the Tory party and it's astonishing how much they won't face economic facts. David Cameron offered some rather mild modernising policy things, like a bit more moderate on gay marriage, a bit more moderate on the environment, a bit more moderate on climate change,
which you would not necessarily expect from a Tory.
Yeah, but they hated him, couldn't stand him, couldn't want to get rid of him. They were saved the thorny issue of trying to get rid of him by the Remain campaign failing in the Brexit referendum.
Yeah.
Theresa May, they didn't like after she colossally fucked up the 2017 Tory election campaign. They got rid of her.
Which I have to say was slightly unfair, because as we said on our discussion in our first episode, the polls were very much in her favour.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bad call based on the information she had to call an election.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
It backfired, yes.
Yeah.
However, I don't necessarily think that she should be held to blame for that.
Yeah.
It would be like, I don't know, kind of... no, I can't.
Well,
I thought I had an analogy there, but I don't.
She came back from Brussels with her own idea of what she thought a Brexit deal could be, the withdrawal agreement.
Yeah.
That wasn't enough for the hard right, the Tory party, the Tory backbenchers, the ERG, the Jacob Rees-Moggs and whatnot. They got rid of her. Now Boris Johnson is in the shit with his own backbenchers because he is adopted, by the standards of the Tory party, quite interventionist policies like the furlough scheme, which is a Labour proposal. John McDonnell and the trade unions proposed a furlough scheme. The Tory backbenchers hate the furlough scheme. They hate the fact that it was extended. They're very sceptical of lockdown. I think a lot of them were publicly quite supportive of lockdown when it happened, because the mood of the country was so was very sympathetic to what the government felt it had to do to combat coronavirus, that the Tory backbenchers went along with it. But now the rules are being relaxed. You kind of see the worms coming out of the woodwork a bit with the Tory backbenchers, and there's more public scepticism voiced from the Tory backbenchers about lockdown. And if they get rid of Boris Johnson, this will be the third time in a little over 10 years that the Tory party has tried and sometimes succeeded to get rid of its leaders and prime ministers because it's not right-wing enough. And you think, what the fuck is going on? This is a party which is just incapable of facing economic facts. Like, the reason that David Cameron was more accepting of things like homosexuality and climate change is because that's where the mainstream of the country is now.
Absolutely. He knew which way the wind was blowing on that issue. It's just certainly not on Brexit.
It's just reality. And the other reality is, you can piss and moan about, socialism all you like. The reality is, if the government did not adopt John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn's political and economic policies, even in its lightest form, like the furlough scheme, for example.
Yeah. And they actually nationalised the railways for about 6 months as well.
Yeah, but the economy, the reality is, if these things were not done by the government, the economy would collapse.
Yeah.
This is a party which is not a political party. It's some kind of insane death cult masquerading as a party. It's a party which is incapable of facing reality. And it prefers its own kind of like libertarian fantasies to actually dealing with
the
problems of governing in the real world. It's just it drives me berserk.
And let's be honest here, and let's be brutal. The only reason that they introduced the furlough scheme, obviously to save the economy, because that directly affects their donors.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it was purely a working class problem that had no repercussions further up the ladder, they would not give a flying fuck.
Yeah. Well, they know. Well, the basically they did it through gritted teeth, I think.
They did, but as I said on the way here again, like it or not, from his perspective, Rishi Sunak has become a radical Tory that is basically a socialist conservative, which talk about oxymoron. But by introducing these necessary schemes and investment, he really has put himself in that cast. And if now he can either own that and get a lot of cred for it from both sides. Yeah.
I mean, it's very interesting
from the moderates of both sides, anyway.
With the race riots in America and a lot of the kind of public anger about racism in society, it wouldn't be beyond me for the Tory party to do something really cynical, like the really, really cynical thing to do from the Tory party's point of view is to get rid of Johnson, put Rishi Sunak in, claim that racism is over, and then just kind of start again. And no doubt there would be a huge bounce in the polls for the Tory party.
Well, yes, and indeed, the odds are very favourable at the bookies that Rishi Sunak will at some point become PM.
Yeah.
And I have to say, if I had to select a Tory, any Tory, then Rishi Sunak wouldn't be a bad shout. Based on what we've seen so far, he is a very fresh-faced guy, and the fresh faces are the ones that generally tend to win out. This is proven time and time again. Tony Blair was the fresh face. John Major over John Smith.
But it's going to be very interesting what happens is that because the Tory party's got this dilemma is that Rishi Sunak's probably the most popular Conservative politician in the country right now, but they all hate what he's doing. So what are they going to do? They might go for someone like fucking Gove or someone.
Oh God, yes.
Which would be a complete disaster.
That would be it.
Gove,
Gove is the God. He's just such a weird character.
Yeah,
he is. He's almost like he's playing a parody of himself.
Do you know what his nickname at university was?
I dread to think.
Have a guess.
Cum guzzler. you said guess. I mean,
it was donkey.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at him, and actually, you can absolutely see Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
No, I think it's a reference to the supposedly the size of his Bronco.
Oh right, he has a. Oh, does he?
Yeah. Well,
at least he's got that going for him.
Yeah.
He should probably talk about that more. It would probably garner him a bit more support. Do like how fucking Errol Flynn used to do and fucking play the piano with it.
In many ways, I have put Michael Gove's cock in your head.
Wow. Okay.
You can edit that out of the.
No, I don't think I will because that's too funny a line not to do. So also fuck you for that. I've been led down the garden path on that one.
Yeah.
Fuck.
So no, but anyway, it's basically fucked up.
You're an asshole.
Yeah.
Well done.
No, but to bring this back full circle to the Labour Party is, I still think the most cynical and yet effectively political, brilliantly political in its own kind of dark, cynical way, would be to make Rishi Sunak Prime Minister right now when he's at the height of his popularity, before he's frankly got the time to fuck up.
Yeah.
Because at the moment he's riding a political high.
He is, yes.
The bubble may burst, but it's probably wiser to put him in number 10 now. Let it burst before the next election when he's still got the time to recover. And rather than let it burst first, then put him into number 10. But, it brings us perfectly, full circle, beautifully to the Labour Party. Because Keir, any other leader would be 20 points ahead, Starmer. And I cannot tell you how passionately I believe this. It's one of the reasons I kind of do and I don't want a Rishi Sunak Prime government, because I should rephrase that. I don't want a Rishi Sunak government, but
I don't want a Tory government. Full stop. It doesn't matter who's the head of it.
But listen to this. At the moment, Keir Starmer is 10 points behind Boris Johnson. Awesome. Can you imagine how wide that gap would be if Rishi Sunak took over at number 10? You could easily imagine a 15, 20 point gap.
Easily.
Easily over Keir Starmer,
And it would, as much as it would be a bit, very much heavily laden with schadenfreude, part of me actually wants to see Keir Starmer fail even more spectacularly.
Yeah, if nothing else, because
it would prove a point.
It's a bit like those people in Greece who, at the height when Greece was actually being crushed by the Troika, the European Union, there were some Greek leftists who said, they were asked the question, what would you most like to happen now? And they said another crash.
Yeah.
Because that would kind of like confirm how bonkers it is. You have one crash, you try the neoliberal solution, it crashes again. And a second crash, counterintuitively, actually closes the argument.
It does.
You know, and that's another way with another conservative leader.
Yeah.
You know, so you got Boris Johnson, he beats Jeremy Corbyn in an election. Keir Starmer takes over saying, we're going to fly in the polls, you know. Everyone wants the status quo entry, no to populism, centrism is here to stay. If another Tory leader were to go 15, 20 points, we could point the finger at Keir Starmer and say, look, you're 20 fucking points behind. It's not the leader, it's your fucking politics.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's the infighting that you've fucking created.
Yeah.
You know, and that you've been complicit in.
Yeah.
And this is again something else we discussed on the way here was the fact that the left has a tendency to eat itself. It is very much again, as I said, it is an Ouroboros. It is the snake that eats its own tail, and this is the problem because the left loves to fracture and splinter off into different little groups. Whereas the Tories are, or the right of politics in general is much better at just simply banding together.
Yeah. I mean, as I said to you in the car on the way here, Fred, look at the way the Tory party managed to corral around Boris Johnson after Boris Johnson had made himself phenomenally unpopular in the Tory party.
Yeah.
The backbenchers hated him before he was elected. That period after the Brexit referendum and before he won the Tory leadership election, he was hated. He was hated. Parliament.
But you know what? He had the right idea because he fucked them all off.
Yeah, he alienated all his colleagues. They couldn't stand him. You know, it was widely known, and he couldn't master his brief. He was lazy. I mean, he went about 2 years where he did nothing apart from anonymously brief the media about Theresa May.
Yeah.
You know, and they all knew it. The minute it became apparent that he was the candidate to beat the Labour Party at a general election, they forgot all that and got behind him.
Yeah.
On the left kind of doesn't understand that.
No.
You know?
No. And this is the fundamental problem that we on the left do have is that we are so focused, and this brings us beautifully onto the identity politics thing again. We have a tendency to look at each other and say you are not worthy because you didn't fucking do X, something fucking ridiculous. You didn't say the right thing, you didn't do this, do that. Whereas the right, you can be a duplicitous, adulterous, philandering asshole. A fuck nugget, a shit weasel, a cock womble, a twat badger. You can be all of those things. But if you are the best bet, you will have the support. And this is absolutely the case. But on the left, it's you didn't fucking say the right thing about transgender people.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get onto this
We absolutely will.
But do you want another drink?
Yes, we do need another beer.
Yes, 1 second. I just want to, before you do that, my last thought before we have a little bit of break is like, we've just had the deputy leadership election in the Labour Party in recent memory in the last, at least this year, last 6 months, so long ago before COVID, but to watch people on the left of the Labour Party tie themselves in knots, not to vote for the best candidate in the deputy leadership election, which in my view was Richard Bergen.
Yes.
By quite a significant way. But again, it's very instructive when we talk about identity politics, because I think I've said earlier, there's a good identity politics, which is, the kind that we've seen in America with Black Lives Matter, or at least the kind of more militant aggressive side, which is like that I like. But there's also a bad version. There's also a bad version of identity politics, which is around now, and me and Fred are very sceptical of, to watch people tie themselves in knots not to vote for Richard Bergen was beyond belief. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, you know, this kind of this idea that anyone who goes against that goes against the narrative has to be dogpiled.
Yeah.
And you know, and publicly shamed. Much this was seen with Rebecca Long Bailey, who shared an article. We mentioned this in the last episode. She shared an article that said about it. It mentioned it wasn't the whole article. It was just like a little mention in there, some sort of conspiracy that the Israeli defense forces had trained American police in restraint with all this sort of kneeling on people's necks, a la George Floyd. But and then again, I mentioned in that episode, a few days later, I actually saw a clip of Israeli defense forces at a checkpoint, kneeling on a poor Palestinian fella's neck.
Yeah, and the most critical thing you could say about Maxine Peake, who is the actor who was interviewed in the interview, which was eventually retweeted by Rebecca Long Bailey, the most critical thing you could say about her, that she wasn't meticulous in her use of language, and that, you know, but really, I mean, come on, I mean, she was right in the broadest.
She was fucking right. It's as simple as that.
Yeah,
she was fucking right.
I mean, who gives a fucking rat's arse that she wasn't, you know, exactly spot on with her language? Like, who gives a fuck? She was right in substance.
Exactly, and this is, you know, but it's any excuse to put yourself forward as the paragon of morality.
Yeah,
and that is the problem with identity politics and the left in general. Yeah. It's this constant. No, I'm Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus. It's and the message gets so fucking convoluted and so diluted that we end up coming across as a bunch of fucking loonies.
Yeah, and
you know, there is, and of course, the classic phrase that you hear from the right, the loony left. And when it's when we can't get our own house in order, what do you expect? Then, you know, not always are they wrong. You know, we do need to abandon all of this ridiculous infighting and all of this this constant vying for position of wokest bay.
Do you want to? It's very interesting. Have we talked about momentum on an episode yet?
We mentioned it in episodes 1 and 2, but we can absolutely, because momentum are a great.
When we talk about the identity issues, there's a couple of things, because being inactive in our local. Oh shit! Sorry,
well
mate.
Done. That's a broken plate. Never mind.
No. Sorry, dude.
Fuck.
Mate. Sorry. I'm really sorry. I'll buy you a new plate.
It's only £1. Don't fucking worry about that shit. I don't. It's not exactly. It wasn't exactly Clara's Cliff.
Yeah, sorry, dude. I'll buy you a new plate. Yeah. So I just.
You'd fuck a brand new cunt up. You would.
I just.
Right, on that, we'll take a pause because we need more beer.
Yeah, cheers.
Right.
That's sorry, dude.
Right, new balls, please, or rather, should I say, new plates,
New
please.
plates, sorry.
Yeah. Never mind, accidents happen.
Where were we again? I can't remember.
Oh, bollocks. I don't know. Like we ever have a script.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were talking about momentum. That's what it was.
Yeah. No, actually, I think we were talking about.
You mentioned.
We're getting on to identity politics. I was mentioning momentum because you mentioned the fact of sectarianism and the constant kind of splitting of the left, and you know, how the left finds endless ways of just dividing itself and factional infighting, which are just, you know, amazing to witness. The kind of the lengths it will go to split. Something which I think is demonstrated perfectly by a magazine called New Socialist. So,
yes.
before I say this, I just want to make something absolutely clear. We're going to touch on the issues surrounding transgenderism and the transgender community. Now, just want to make something absolutely clear so I'm not misunderstood, is that I wish no ill will towards any transgender person whatsoever.
No, neither. None of us do.
I wish no harm on anyone, and there's no offence on anyone. But there was something, and because I have recently been trying to give myself an education in the transgender kind of wars that are going on at the moment. I've played out a lot on social media, and it's, as I was saying to Fred before we started the programme, some of the most corrosive vitriol I've ever witnessed in left-wing politics has been around transgender politics. You know, the most vicious, the bile and the viciousness you hear around those debates are really beyond belief.
Yes.
So there's a magazine called New Socialist, which is set up by this bloke called Tom Gann, who's kind of like I think a cult figure in certain left-wing circles. He was a Labour candidate in 2017 for somewhere or another, and he founded this magazine along with a couple of other like-minded individuals. But on their website, they published something called a model motion for solidarity with the trans community, and in it, this model it's something for Labour branches, I believe, but in it focuses on another examples of what it considers to be transphobia, and some of the examples of transphobia, or what New Socialist identifies as transphobia, are really quite something, like Laura Pidcock, for example, and Tribune magazine. Now, you know, few people in the whole country have done more to make left-wing politics appealing, attractive, young, accessible, open, you know, than Laura Pidcock. You know, Laura Pidcock's been absolutely instrumental in that. And of course, the New Tribune is an absolutely brilliant magazine. And, you know, you got to remember, a few years before, it would have been inconceivable that a magazine like the New Tribune could exist. So you wonder, is this, you know, because obviously there is transphobia in the world, and, you know, I don't wish to deny that, but equally, really, I mean, Laura Pidcock, a purveyor of hate, discrimination, really? This young, committed, articulate socialist from a working class family in the northeast of England is some kind of raving, frothing at the mouth purveyor of hate and discrimination? I mean, it's disgusting. It's appalling.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, it is no secret that we both hold Laura in great regard. Yeah, it to me, again, this is a perfect example of how this kind of holier than thou attitude develops on the left. Everyone is a bastard. Doesn't matter where they're from. Everyone's a bastard.
Even if you've dedicated enormous amounts of time and energy to advancing left-wing politics in this country, if you put one tiny foot out of line, or not even a foot out of line, just to say, you know what, I've got concerns around this, I've got, you know, a little bit of anxiety around blah blah blah. Even if you just do that, you'll somehow some sort of, or everything else you may have done, all the time and energy you may have given in commitment and, you know, is somehow was thrown out the window. You know,
yeah,
go fuck yourself.
Absolutely,
so just go fuck off.
Absolutely, and I have a major problem with that kind of attitude. Putting the foot wrong, because it is highly Orwellian. Yeah. The idea that anyone who goes against the groupthink, which is exactly what it is. It's a groupthink. Will be basically Room 101.
Yeah.
You know, and that's basically what the left does to itself. Never mind anybody else. It's what it does to itself. And this is why we have such a problem at the moment. This is why we can't fucking make any headway. Or if we do make headway, like 2017, we again look to look internally to think, well, why wasn't it better? You know, trying to win harder. And despite the fact that we made huge inroads in 2017, and all it took was a little extra push. But the fucking centrists, the Blairites in the party, couldn't let it fucking drop. They couldn't accept the fact that their time was up. And now, I suppose you could say that in many ways they won the argument, because they're back.
Yeah, I mean,
they're back.
We are where we are. You know.
We are where we are, and maybe we should accept that fact. But having said that, these people are interlopers. They are not socialists. They are not Labour. To call Labour at the moment, and before Jeremy Corbyn, since John Smith sadly passed away, so through the Blair years, Brown, Miliband, and now Starmer, all these periods, Labour, the name, is a complete misnomer, because they just did not. I mean, all right, the first term of Tony Blair, I will give him that. He did make some great inroads, especially in education. That was his big thing, wasn't it? Education. Which is far too many syllables, realistically. Yeah. It's no get Brexit done, is it? Let's be honest. No. Fucking hell. Lord knows a lot of people could do with a lot more fucking education now. Because, they clearly don't get it.
No. I mean, the thing I think we'd have is, like, we were talking about this in the car, is like, it's important to remember, like, what you've just described is the kind of Blairites. I mean, they will always be tossers, wherever they're from. But
realistically, yes.
There's another group of people who are nominally on the left, but if you look at the issues which are their most passionate issues, it's all the identity issues, sex, gender, and things like that, and which are important, but they are important. They're not the end of anything.
They are important, but again, the idea that people are linked because of arbitrary characteristics that they are not responsible for, that they have no control over, such as what sex they are, what race they are. These are things that are completely beyond the control of the individual, and yet the identity politics takes this overarching assumption that all of their interests must be exactly the same. And this is a branch of identity politics called intersectionality, where it does lump everyone into a big group, which is kind of like the new prejudice, if you like.
Well, my whole thing with, I think
it's like neo-racism.
I was thinking to myself earlier today, actually, that intersectionality, when you really get right down to it, it is just basically a highfalutin word for something which is just like pretty much dyed in the wool, sort of straightforward, uncomplicated liberalism. It's kind of like woolly liberal,
very much so.
That's all it really is. It's just woolly liberalism dressed up in some sort of highfalutin language,
But I mean, I just said the term neo-racism, and I think that's fitting, because the idea of racism is attributing certain aspects to a whole group of people, regardless of any other context. but this is taking it one step further and subdividing by other issues, not just on race.
I mean, I think the most
astrology is another good example.
Yeah, the most corrosive effect of identity politics is it's undermined class-based politics, hasn't it? In a strange way, I think.
Yeah. Well, the thing it doesn't help that everyone kind of assumes. People generally tend to assume that they are a higher station than they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thinks that likes to think that they're a bit middle class. What I mean, they're a bit more of a cut above. Now, personally, I always say you can tell what class people are by where they shop.
Yeah.
The people who are lower middle class, they shop at Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
Because they want that extra sort of exclusivity, but they can't quite afford to shop at Waitrose.
Mind you, I will say this. This is very true. I have the discount section at Waitrose is really, really good.
Now you're showing your cards.
Yeah, no. Honestly, there was a Waitrose very near to where I used to work, and I used to do night shifts. So I used to cycle past the Waitrose about 8 o'clock in the morning. And if you went to Waitrose, the minute it opened at 8 o'clock, you could go to the discount section, get discounted Waitrose food really, really cheaply. And it actually wasn't that bad because you picked up Waitrose stuff for like fuck all. So it wasn't. I have shopped at Waitrose, but admittedly in the discount section.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough, And I have been in once because I was looking for a particular product that nowhere else had.
Yeah.
And thankfully Waitrose did.
Yeah.
And I felt so out of place there.
Yeah.
I felt like everyone was eyeing me up.
They've got.
You are not one of us.
Do you know they've got orzo in their essential range? Orzo, yeah.
Fucking hell.
Have you ever known
rice-shaped pasta?
You know where it says essentials baked beans, essentials red kidney beans, essentials pasta?
Yeah.
They've got
essentials orzo.
Essentials orzo.
And I bet hummus.
Yeah.
I guarantee hummus is an essential and rioja.
What kitchen has orzo as an essential item? I've got no idea. Whatsoever.
I have seen orzo. I have absolutely no intention of ever having it.
Yeah. I've never had it either. Oh,
it's just rice. It is literally rice-shaped pasta.
I've had it once.
Yeah,
and that's it.
Yeah, I think I might have had it.
It's not even that interesting, really. Actually,
no, it isn't. It's just another pasta shape. It would be like you know. Yeah, I mean,
it's just
only the common people have fusilli.
Yeah,
fusilli and farfalle are for commoners. Yeah. Whereas we really like orzo and concheli. Oh, I don't know. But yes, this is that to me is a better gauge of how of where people really stand socially, and this kind of like I say, people always think they are a cut above what they actually are, because they have optimism, because they actually think that they've got it pretty good in many ways. Whereas in reality, they're actually just as badly off as the rest of us. It's very strange that people will have that kind of that optimism, and in a way, it's also kind of nice that people still have the optimism, because Lord knows we're fucking short of it these days. With everything else going on. But in many ways, it is the woolly liberal that you mentioned that is responsible for a lot of the fracturing of society now. Because it's the woolly liberal that says, oh yes, by all means, from all and sundry, do come over here. You're just not allowed to live in our little Hampshire village. You have to live up north with the plebs. And I've got no problems with immigration necessarily, as long as you're here to actually fucking contribute, which the majority are, let's be honest. I don't know, I've never met I've only met one foreign person who I didn't like, and that was because he was a complete arsehole. You know, but he wasn't. You know, but literally, I've worked with a lot of foreign workers, and you know, I found them the nicest people generally. But yeah, and anyway,
well, I think
separate issue.
I think what we've established is that you know, there's I mean, identity politics it's in many ways. I was kind of saying this to you, Fred. There's one of it. I don't honestly see what the benefit is of having such a toxic and corrosive debate.
No.
You know, because ultimately it doesn't benefit anyone.
No.
Including the transgender community.
No, it doesn't.
You know, I mean, who on earth? I mean, if you have one section of if there's some transphobic people, and then there's on, you know, the hard right, and if you've got people on the hard left, and a lot of people in the middle, and the people in the middle say, well, you know, we're very sort of kindly, easygoing, tolerant sort of people, but you know, we're mostly accepting, but we've just got one or two issues here we would like clarification of. You know, some concerns about how this would impact on safeguarding, you know, blah blah blah. And then there's people on the left who just scream and yell
autistically
fascist at anyone who even not criticises but just remotely expresses the slightest bit of reservation about it,
which is exactly the groupthink attitude.
Yeah. It ultimately does no one any good at all, and it's curious that it's actually not politics at all, which is actually my biggest reservation of it. It's actually anti-politics.
Yes.
It's not actually politics.
No, because it's not operating in good faith.
Yeah.
It is a very disingenuous argument.
I mean,
but you know, when again earlier on, I spoke about, you know, we mentioned safeguarding there. The big one that came up a few years back in America was the idea that if you identified as a different gender to the one that you were assigned at birth, that you could use the bathroom, as they say, but toilet, that of the gender which you identify with now. So if you're a man transitioning to a female, then you can use the female bathroom. And there was a big hoo-ha, especially from Republican voices, that this would somehow put women, like I don't necessarily want to say real women, because that is a very loaded term at the moment. But naturally born women. Let's say that. That sounds slightly safer. Fucking hell. No, this is the thing. You have to pussyfoot around everything. And you know, but and that it would put women and girls in danger. And the thing is, you go to a toilet to perform a natural function, to piss, to crap, you know, or to in the case of women, to attend to, you know, feminine hygiene, etc. I get that. Women and girls, you know, there are stories of men going into a women's bathroom and committing sexual assault and or rape. That would still happen anyway. Regardless of whether you let transgender people in or not. Rapists are going to rape. They are nasty, vile, abhorrent. It is a nasty, vile, abhorrent crime committed by, you know, people who have serious problems. That somehow in their head they think that this is the right thing to do, or what gives them pleasure. It's awful. But it would still happen. And it does, and it has happened. I couldn't necessarily cite you a case, but I'm sure a quick Google search will quickly turn something up.
I mean, there's no...
But no one sort of worries necessarily about, about gay men using the gents' toilet, or lesbian women.
Well, I think
sexual assault can be committed by anybody.
There's a very...
It's a very equal opportunities kind of thing.
The thing. The idea. My own feeling would be there's a very obvious, way of you could build consensus here, which is to say, look, I've got no issue with transgender toilets. I've used them before. When I've been to, the local council here. The local council in the city where we are has gender neutral toilets, and I use them.
And I've used them in the. There was a place up in Hartlepool that had gender neutral toilets, and also at the university in our city. They have gender neutral toilets.
Because many of the, and that's an example where I'm kind of changing my way of living and my attitudes towards the kind of the new presence in our lives of the transgender community and whatnot. But and many of the things of transgender, the transgender equality movement, I have no quality with. I have no problem. I have no quarrel with. I have no quarrel with using transgender toilets.
No.
Which I have no.
I don't think any rational person would.
And I've no. If you want to be known by your preferred pronoun, I'm happy out of courtesy to refer to you as that. And if you want, and if you, I'm absolutely, I'd be horrified if anyone was turned down for a job on the basis that they were transgender or any of that. But I think, but I think that the friction comes when you start to explore things which are just blatantly anti-science. Things like, in the worst form it takes, and I know this doesn't apply to every single activist I've ever met, but there's a fringe of people who would say that gender isn't actually just about biological reality. It's just, it's some sort of weird
social construct.
Well, no, there's this hippie thing. It's not about the body. It's not about it's not about biology. It's just this kind of thing that happens inside you. Bollocks. It's just not.
It's a thing that happens inside you. Yes, it's called science. It's called biology. It's it's controlled by hormones.
Yeah.
And people, and children going through puberty, some of them have a hard time dealing with how this is making them feel.
But there's a real, the big kind of like, it's a huge leap to say that, radical, invasive, life-altering surgery is not the kind of thing which should be undertaken lightly.
Absolutely not.
And
it is a huge step.
It's a huge commitment.
Yes, and obviously it's not. Every trans person who has fully transitioned, but there is a percentage, and I couldn't quote it to you right now, of those people who have gone all that way, who then later regret their decision and wish they hadn't done it.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean to say that all of them feel that way. Of course they don't. Some of them have go on to be much happier and live fulfilling lives. There was a classic example. I can't remember the name that they undertook after the transition, but there was in the 1950s there was a radio show starring Spike Milligan and Peter Sellers, Harry Seacombe, called The Goon Show, and it's bloody funny. It's fucking hilarious. Anybody who loves comedy, these are the people that inspired Monty Python. So they have a lot of influence over comedy. They used to have musical interludes just to break it up. And one of the orchestra leader was a man called Wally Stott, and later on Wally Stott transitioned into a female, and I think by then she took on the name Angela something. Can't remember off the top of my head. But then when also actually I believe did the music for Watership Down.
Right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was like I say, Angela something. I'm pretty certain. And you know, and then lived out the rest of her life. You know, quite happy, and whatever. I think only died relatively recently. So yeah, sometimes I imagine quite often. You know, it is the making of someone.
But I think the thing to say is that it's as I said before, it's there's always been a certain number of transgender individuals in society, but in the past 5 or 10 years, the visibility of the transgender community has exploded, and what's happened is a consensus is still emerging, and you know, and so a consensus will emerge in the fullness of time, but it's still too early to decide on a consensus, and it would just be better for everyone if the debate was a bit less corrosive, you know.
Yeah,
and you know,
it would. I think there needs to be a much more open, honest, and just inclusive debate on these things. And you know, we see these things mirrored in history because obviously the gay and lesbian community had to push hard to gain the recognition that they now have. Sorry, but and we are kind of seeing a similar kind of thing with the transgender community. Now, there are some that will say that all transgenderism is some kind of mental illness or whatever, and there might, and again I'm not condoning, but there might be an argument for that. I don't know. I don't know, and there's nothing wrong with I don't know. But you know, to just simply say. To just simply disregard a section of society, you know, on virtually no evidence is, well, it's very disingenuous. So to come at it from that point of view, you know, because people used to think that gay people were somehow mentally deficient. So it's interesting. To draw that comparison, because there is a lot of parallels there. But then you can go to the darker side, the more insidious side of this argument, and the LGBT community in some ways is there is an attempt to hijack it by pedophiles, basically. Right. There is, yes, and you know, because they see their not all of them, but there are some that see their attraction to children as their own sexuality, and therefore should not be you know, so put down by society, and I know that sounds an absolutely ridiculous notion, but they're of course arguing in very bad faith, because you know, if you know, to say that it's just the same as you know, someone being straight or someone being gay, no, it's not, because your intended partner is not a consenting person.
I mean, this is...
They are unable to consent. Therefore, it is totally different. That is just you wanting to enact your awful desires, which you should really get help for, man.
Yeah.
Not you. You should really get fucking help for it because it ain't right.
Yeah. I mean, this is... We can... I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but it's just... You know, I've never... I cannot think of another issue where the bile and the hatred is so huge, and it's sad. I mean, it's sad to me that a great left-wing politician like Laura Pidcock is being dragged through the mud, and you know, on spurious grounds. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's nonsense to suggest that Laura Pidcock is somehow kind of kicking in the press minority. She's evidently not, and
no.
I think I mean, as I say, a consensus will emerge in the long term, but it's too early. And
I mean, realistically, it's only been in the last maybe 4 years, 5 years.
I would say 5 to 10.
5 to 10 years. Yeah, let's be generous with the with the time. And this kind of, it has emerged slowly over time, and just like the gay and lesbian community, the trans community is a small percentage of overall society. It's not, and I want to be clear here, when I say the word normal, I mean normal in the scientific sense of running with the normal being the usual outcome, which is that male is attracted to female and vice versa. So that it's a small percentage, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should be ostracized. It shouldn't necessarily mean that they are disregarded, and that their issues are not taken into account. However, what I have issue with, and again said it earlier on, this idea that we have to have it constantly pushed in our faces. If you want to be what you want to be, then just be.
Yeah. Just
do it. I do not ask gay people or whatever to people of different sexualities to myself. I do not ask them or demand of them to accept the fact that I really, really like women. That's because why the hell would I? Because no one cares. No one else outside of me cares, or anyone who's inexplicably attracted to me. No one cares what my sexuality is. I don't care what yours is. I don't care what anybody's other sexuality is, other than who I may or may not be attracted to. In which case I would care, because that lets me know if there's a chance or not, basically. But this idea of this militant, demanding of acceptance, this and not just acceptance, but now you have to make now you kind of have to make allowances and grant me special privileges, because we've seen how, for example, feminism has sort of taken on this this radical, and a lot of intersectionality and identity politics is linked to feminism, or radical feminism, I should say. And there's an even further splintering of that, even where that is entirely trans-exclusionary, trans-exclusionary radical feminism, or TERF, and they don't like being called that, which is why I absolutely insist that you call them that. You know, and they completely reject the idea that you know, well, they completely reject the idea of transgender people at all, because you know, especially if you're a female wanting to transition into a male, because it's almost seen as a betrayal, like you're you know, you're betraying your sisters and all this, and you know, again, it's something that does not matter. And I know you're a bit cagey about talking about feminism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I get it. That's fine, and I'm not going to force you. But there is this sect of it that is very venomous, and spews a lot of bile. Girls, of course, that's not all feminists. Of course, it's not. Doesn't mean to say that those people are not feminists, because that's not a true Scotsman argument. Then it's just a bad argument. They are. It's just that they are a different part of it. Kind of like how ISIS isn't all Muslims, but the fact that they are Muslim, but they've taken this completely awful interpretation.
Just gives me an image of like the feminist ISIS, you know.
I'd love to see a feminist ISIS. Fucking hell, that would be great, wouldn't it? That would be fantastic. I would love to see what that looked like. If someone could make a picture of that, like get on Photoshop and make a picture of that, I'd love to see it. I really would. Anyway, so that is kind of you know, but it's always the loudest voices that are the ones that are heard, and the loudest voices tend to be the minority, tend to be the radical minority, who spoil it for the rest of the moderates.
Well, that's the thing. To go back to these issues, is that you know, we could do a whole other episode of just on the Labour Party alone, and
we probably will.
How identity politics is kind of influencing the Labour Party,
well, it is in many ways. I mean, you can absolutely argue that. I mean, you know, Jess Phillips, you know, our beloved. Yeah, definitely joking on that one. Yeah,
but
she's just, you know, she's just awful.
Yeah,
but and then you know, just this pushing of this narrative that, you know, that these people need to be, you know, that just need to be elevated to a sort of pedestal status.
Yeah.
Whereas no, that's not what equality is. If you can name me a right that a transgender person has that I don't, or that I have that a transgender person doesn't, I'll accept that. If you can prove it, then fine, I will accept that, and I would absolutely push for, you know, the changes to redress that balance. But I can't think of any off the top of my head. Doesn't mean to say they don't exist, but